Thanks everyone for joining us. We're the Camp's Emerging Tech Group. And today we've got a really interesting topic. It's digital twinning. And we've got a very special subject matter expert, Ben Marsh, who is typically hosting these sections with Scout Systems. He specializes in production process optimization through different software and hardware solutions that facilitate tracking and measurability of areas in production that are very difficult to track and measure. So with that, I will let Ben talk a little bit more about Scout Systems, and we'll start with an explanation of what digital twinning is. Ben?
All right. Thanks for having me. Big fan of the podcast. So digital twinning. The best way to think about this is taking something that you have in your physical world. So since we're talking about manufacturers, it's your factory. So how do you take your physical world and you create a digital render of it? If we're going to take, like, let's say another analogy, you have your old photo albums that have all of your pictures, your Polaroids, and you want to scan those and make it into a digital copy. But then imagine if every single photo was properly named and properly dated. So then when you have two different versions, you have your old school photo album, and then you have a digital twin of that. And if you wanted to find pictures of your third wedding anniversary, which one is going to be faster to find? You could go through a Rolodex of books and you can try to find it here. Or if you know the date or the name, you simply do a search and you'll be able to find it much more quickly in a digital twin. So digital twinning is basically the evolution of the IoT movement. I was reading that over 85% of all IoT devices are going to have some degree of digital twin functionality. So the most important thing is to find out, what is it about a facility that you would benefit of having that digital copy to allow you to reduce the latency of looking up information, understanding what's going on. So it's a very vague term, but what's really nice about this is that you hone in on a specific process or complication that you're working to improve, whether it's engineering design, whether it's process improvement in operations. There's directions that you can go when you digitalize a factory and create that twin to benefit an organization.
So I think I always pictured a digital twin as like basically a CAD representation, right? Like you take either your shop floor or a machine, you build it in CAD and you look at it and you can do all these things. Are there more types than just that? And is that even accurate?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. There's so many different facets to this. Let's say that you were a manufacturer and you had a critical piece of equipment that had multiple different variables that were coming in, temperature, pressures, and all sorts of different details. If that machine and that asset was a complex device and you needed to measure and understand everything, you could add a digitally twin capability to that one where you're having those sensory devices. The benefit to this is basically you want to take whatever's happening in the physical world and have a digital representation. That way you don't have to make phone calls or go to the production floor and measure it yourself manually. You can just look it up. So depending on what you're trying to accomplish, CAD modeling, for example, I was reading about how like NASA will create a digital twin of their assets that they launch in space. And the benefit of this is that way that they could re-engineer or correct something that goes wrong. For them, it's absolutely critical to have that physical model of it. So that way they have the ability to simulate things. Now, for a manufacturing facility, do they necessarily need to have a three-dimensional rendered version of this one? Maybe for some, but for the bulk, if you're just trying to work on capacity improvements and trying to figure out your processes, it's going to look a little bit different. But the goal comes down to what is it that you're trying to accomplish, and then make sure that you're putting in forth the technology that best suits that deliverable goal.
Hey Ben, does this look at all like a dashboard? I mean, it can be a dashboard representation as well.
Correct. So it comes down to, again, what you're trying to get. So for operations, this is where that's going to be my specialty. So for that one, yes, it would be dashboards that would show you these are the statuses of all your assets. These are the predicted times of when these things are going to finish. This is what they're going through. This is how fast they're moving. And it gives you that quick snapshot in a simple to view dashboard that you have all that content. It could also be in like a reporting modal. So to be able to look up that historical viewpoint and giving you access to knowing what took place. So you could be notified as the now, and then you could also be exceptionally notified as what has happened historically because you don't have to ask your area lead what happened at graveyard shift last night. But you don't need to do that. You could simply look up a report and find out exactly what took place. You're able to cut out all the external labor that's applied to the analog world. And here you could just look up those specific results to get whatever you're looking for.
Ben, would you kind of share your evolution? I know you started off as an engineer, and so you've seen this whole thing evolve, and then you jumped into your own business doing this, and then I think you've seen some of the benefits and ROI the companies have experienced. But it kind of be fun to hear kind of your evolution.
Yeah. So my background. So I was a manufacturing engineer, and I went from manufacturing engineer to black belt Lean Six Sigma, and that just really set off my career into continuous improvement projects. So everywhere I went, my goal was to make sure that I could research and understand what the problems were and then put forth a solution. And while I was doing this at the time, and we're talking well over a decade ago, the technology that was available was quite a bit more scarce than it is now. And there would always be a difficulty with the data sets that I could find. I could either find machine data, I could find operator notes, and then I could find production scheduling information. But very rarely could I take machine information, apply it to an operator, their skill set, their knowledge of what was going on, and to find out the source, the materials, and what was going through it. So the difficulty that I had is that there was always these three different pillars: the equipment, the people, and then the operations. But there wasn't really good systems out there in place that would bridge that void. I found a huge void when it came to the human involvement of an operation. So we created Scout as a mechanism to bridge those three pillars. So we utilize essentially work instructions as our sensory device to really understand everything, the intricate details of an operation. You don't have to use work instructions, but it's a wonderful tool. Then we have machine monitoring hardware that we can connect into your assets or your jigs and your tools. And then of course, our other suite that overviews the whole entire operation. But what that does is it allows us to know every single time that a certain thing happens to a piece of machinery, we could tell you with absolute confidence which operator was there, how skilled is this operator, and how many times have they done these things. And then also you can look upstream to your processes to find out, were there potential reworking or defects or things that took place upstream that might have led to these complications that took place in your production floor. So like if I had like a machining center and it was jamming regularly, well, maybe you find out that upstream where the people are cutting the block material, that they were also having tooling issues where maybe they needed to get a sharpening blade because they were getting a lot of burrs that led to this issue down the floor. If you don't have that full viewpoint, all you're going to do is look at this machine and say, this machine's failing and failing and failing. But the reality is the machine upstream is what's actually failing, not the one that's catching the issue. So my progression with Scout, I mean, we're always expanding and adding to it, but it is that understanding that manufacturers, we have to catch up. It's very difficult to go from 0 to 100%. And we were just trying to build a tool that helps bridge that void.
So Ben, you and I have been talking about this subject matter for a little while now, and it's so interesting to me. One, you and I really connect on liking to track and measure and use data to make decisions. And there's kind of the old adage of you can't manage what you don't measure. As we've been talking, what's kind of come to my mind is that we use certain KPIs that I look to manage my business. But as we've been talking and you've been kind of highlighting the different areas of the production processes in different shops, there are things that I know I'm not measuring now, or areas of our workflow that I'm not looking at, and I'm 100% sure I should be. So my question is, based on your experience with different customers, how does this impact how I should or how they should view their KPIs? How's your interaction with customers changed what KPIs they're actually measuring? And maybe give some examples of, what things I should be looking at that there's a good chance I'm not.
Okay. When I was doing the manufacturing engineering world, there was a common saying to add to yours is you don't want to get caught up in analysis paralysis. So in the analog world where you are physically recording and you are physically going through and analyzing the data, or I should say manually doing that, you could spend an incredible long and just overwhelming amount of time looking at data, trying to make sense of it. So in the analog world, I do not recommend that, because when you have too many KPIs and you have too much data, that means your operators are getting slowed down because they're writing things, and you're going to be forced to cherry pick which KPIs are going to be advantageous. Otherwise, you're paying for more data than you're able to utilize. And if you were to add on data capturing systems, the same thing, you're just going to get more and more data, and you're not going to be able to make use of it. Now you do the opposite. When you switch to digitally twinning, the major benefit that you have is you have 24/7, 100% time study. You know everything. So in the analog world, I would say that's really bad, because you're paying for all that data and you're paying for all that analysis. In the digital twinning world, you get everything. There's nothing is missed. And so the benefit to this is you get everything and you have a flat rate cost. Whereas before you would have to pay for more and more and more. And then with digital twinning, with every single potential KPI that you could look at, now you get to cherry pick which are the things you want to analyze. And so when manufacturers go from the analog world to the digital world, yes, there's going to be new KPIs that appear. Having the ability to know every single function in every single time study, it's going to give you a little bit more insight to what is a realistic time study. If you have each operator go through a process and you can compare operators 1 to 2 to 3, that's going to give you more insight what's a realized cycle time, or how frequent do these problems take place. Whereas when you do a time study and each operator is fixed to a certain location, you're only getting a time study on how that job went through. In that previous example, how I was talking about, if you have a piece of block material that's jamming your machine, you might find out that it's the burrs from upstream. Well, if you did a time study on that one, you might find or think that that cycle time is much longer than it should be, whereas in reality, it was due to a process complication. So what you will start to do is when you digitize your factory and you have access to this, I highly recommend that the management team take the data seriously, sit down, look at it, and get a sense of, okay, what were we doing right? What are the new things that we're seeing? But I would say the vast majority of companies that switch to a digital twin model, they do discover new KPIs. It's never going to be a universal solution. So the things that are going to benefit you are not necessarily going to benefit the next customer. But what you want to do is you want to go into it with an open mind, realizing that as you see more and you have access to more, it's going to give you new insight. So there's going to be a learning curve. And that's why it's really important that senior management is on top of this. Not only does change start from the top down, this is going to potentially lead to a culture shift. If you think your OEE is 70%, but then you realize that your OEE is much less than that, your senior management should not reprimand your staff. If anything, you should be praising the fact that this project is shedding light, that there was issues that you couldn't see. And as you said, you can't improve anything that you don't measure. So we got to make sure that you have that visibility so you can make those adaptations as you evolve.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on something. Everybody has, their own unique KPIs based on their own business model. Our business model, we don't make widgets. We are highly customized, low volume by design. And so, like, how does digital twinning benefit someone like me versus, it's really easy for me to see kind of the widget maker. I'm going back to I just reread the goal, and all of this stuff aligns with all of the themes in that book. But I'm picturing kind of the factory floor that widgets are cranking through several different stations and come out the other end. How does digital twinning apply to kind of the low volume, highly customized type of business model?
Well, when we bring on new customers, what we like to focus on is delivering value. So the first thing that I would ask you as a customer would be, is what is it that provides you the most immediate value? Are you chasing capacity improvements? Are you chasing labor shortage? Are you chasing standard work and trying to make sure that you have that in place? Are you trying to get increased quality? Or are you trying to get qualified for, let's say, ISO? So depending on what is going to provide you the greatest value, I would put you into a path to benefit yourself from digital twinning. But what I would usually suggest, if nobody has a solid answer on that, and they're really just going in, they're all equally important. I don't know where to start. We're not good at digitally transforming. We've been doing everything the same for 20, 30 years. For the customers that are in that kind of boat, The thing that I always like to ask is, the first question is, if I was your operator on day one, how am I knowing what I'm doing? How am I starting my job? How am I closing out my job? Is there any paperwork that I need to do? Those things are really important, because when we talk about automation, it's usually a machine, it's a robotic arm, there's something that is fixed to a specific task. But when you start to take the administrative roles, that is usually something that you can clone across the board to all your operators. So if it is the way that you're communicating your jobs and closing things in and out, that's a really, really small form of digital twinning, but it gives you as a manager that visibility of what's taking place on my production floor. And as you start to implement those things there, that means you're able to start getting rid of some of the paper and the analog tasks. So those operators are going to become more and more efficient. Now, that's going to ultimately lead to a reduction in labor, which is going to help with a labor shortage. And it's usually going to increase your capacity, because when your operators are able to reduce those gaps in between production orders and reduce the amount of paperwork they have, that means they have more time available to them to do value added work. Now, that's the most generic version, I would say. But then usually what happens is, when companies look into it and they get more serious about what is it that we want to improve, there's going to be unique cases that you can always expand upon. But my goal would be is to find the fastest way to provide value. And usually I chase paper. Anything that exists in paper format, once you digitally twin it, whether you're a high mix, low volume, or you're a low volume, high mix, that is still going to be something that's universally applied in your plant.
Yeah, that's it's really interesting. I can see areas in our shop that we could use that right this second. We are going through our ISO certifications and a lot of our work processes as we've mapped them out, and we're following our quality management system. We've got a job traveler that follows our tools around the shop, but I've got people in multiple locations that are doing things that need to live on that job traveler. So I can see kind of virtualizing that aspect, and that lends itself to quality workflow. Probably tie in work instructions to that. I mean, I could take up the rest of our time just thinking about how this applies to me. So I'll let other people chime in with more questions. But yeah, these are the reasons I get so excited about this topic.
Well, so here's another thing that I get excited, because as like a supporter of small businesses, one thing that's really nice about this is that if you have 10,000 employees and if you have 10 employees, for the most part, of course, there's a little bit of a price breaks as you get bigger and bigger and you scale things. But realistically, it's close to linear as you start to scale this out. So the cost to digitize, it's usually just the equipment that you're putting out there, the sensors, the devices that you put. If you have 10 employees, you're talking about 10. Whereas if you have 10,000, you're talking about 10,000. So the benefit to this is that the digital movement that we're seeing in manufacturing is allowing the smaller manufacturers to compete at that world-class level. And the price difference is, like I said, it's very close to linear. So what's nice about this is that if you are competing with a bigger, more established manufacturer that has the budget to have all these state-of-the-art devices, this movement, digital, is one of the cheapest things that you could do to a factory to boost the efficiency. So as you go down that route, it's going to level that playing field. You're going to be able to provide your customers with far more insight about the product that you're building for them. And the whole entire point of being ISO is to bolster that confidence in your customer. And when you have a complete digital twin and you could tell them that you know the second of every single thing that's taken place and where their products are, that's going to give you a bit more, well, it should give you more confidence. But I've seen it firsthand where the customers are excited that their vendors are stepping up their game because they know that they're going to be able to provide a higher quality product.
Ben?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jake.
No, go ahead, Kirk.
I get very excited about this whole topic and what you're explaining. One of the things that you have mentioned to me is that once they get this information, there's a lot of self-improvement that happens. And like with Jake's shop, and he's explaining, the opportunities within his shop. But what's been happening to your customers when they get this information and they see things for the first time, maybe?
It's usually a little bit of a shell shock, but like most of the time we do a good job teaching our customers in the beginning, like, be prepared. You're going to see things that you have not seen before. And very rarely it's good things. So when you really start to have that 100% visibility of your plant, you're going to start to discover gaps. You're going to start to see waste in way more direct fashion than you could have before. Usually when people are recording things like waste, the operators are recording this down, or they're flipping a switch. And each time they do that, they might be in the process of finishing something before they go look at the clock and write it down. And usually when I see people's notes, waste seems to happen very closely to the 15-minute mark. So it almost always starts at 9:30 and ends at 9:45. And it's very rarely 9:31 and 20 seconds and 10:42 and 36 seconds. And so the difference that you have here is, as soon as you start to get exact measurements of these things, all of that little bit of padding that the operators might have written down, which like totally justifiable to the operators based on the technology that they had to measure it, that starts to get tighter. And as you get tighter and tighter realization of your data, you're going to start to see that, hey, maybe the operators, it was 18 minutes, not 15 minutes. And if that happens every single day, every single shift, those 3 minutes each instance can start to add up. So as you have that information, you need to realize that if you thought you had, let's say, 20% waste, you might have 30%. And when you see that, don't say, oh, this is wrong because we have been measuring this and it's always been 20%. It's really that the tools that you've had to measure just have a lot of error built into them. Now you're getting more and more accuracy. Now, initially, that sounds bad because you might think, oh no, our waste is 50% higher than it really is. But what that really shows you is that you have that much more opportunity. Waste is one of the easiest ways. You cut your waste and your capacity increases, your cost it go down, and the benefits to your plant just skyrocket. I love discovering waste because it's just all opportunity. So that's what I would like to make sure that manufacturers understand. Go in there knowing that this is going to probably hurt in the very beginning.
I have a quick question, and it may sound like a silly question, but I feel like I'm getting a good idea of like what a digital twin is and what the benefits are, but like what does it look like in the day-to-day? Because you don't just like install this software and then it solves your problems, right? Like people have to interact with it somehow. So like, what does that look like? How difficult is it to get trained up on that? Do you need one dedicated person that's all they do at your company, or is it simpler than that?
Yeah, that's a great question. A little bit simpler than that. I'm going to pull up something and see if I can share. Let me grab this. So this is just a quick screenshot. And so I'll share with the viewers and you guys here. Then I want to make sure that I am not sharing anybody's proprietary information. So this is going to be, let's see if I can share this with y'all. All right. Are you seeing an image that says station production history?
Yep. Okay,
great. So this is just a quick snapshot of just one of many different reports that you have. We just had to blur some stuff out. So what this is somebody's specifically their machine to asset. And there's two names here that are blurred out. And what this is this is showing over the course of a week where were operators at that machine. So we could see who was working where. And so as one shift ended, the next person came in. Now, there's nothing about this report that stands out that's just wildly gross. This is a customer that's been using it for a while, so things are pretty stabilized. But down here, they gave the quick snapshot of KPIs. So we could see that approximately 80% of the value of the time has been value added production. They're making good parts. They've lost some time to setup, and they're losing about 15% to what we call non-value add, which would be usually waste. Now, when you start to see your waste and you have a better realization of it, of course, you have the ability to see what are those instances. You'll get a Pareto, you can do drill down reports. But the ones that I see early on is when customers have waste, it's usually frequently. So once you start to get a better control of it, the occurrences of waste, they usually get fewer. The duration of waste usually gets less. The goal is to find out is how often are your operators running into these problems? Because traditionally, they might not be recording every single sliver that takes place. So you want to be able to understand what is our total KPIs of total allocated time, value add, non-value added, setup, and just gaps as a whole. But then once you have that, then the idea is how do you understand it even further? Maybe you lose 15% of your production time to missing materials. Well, is that 15% of your time is because Mondays we lose everything, but then the rest of the week everything goes smoothly? Or is it every single job? And if it's every single job, well, then you clearly have a process failure that is hindering your ability of your operators. But in my experience, when you talk to those operators, they'll say things like, that's the way it's always been. Like, this is how we do it. So to them, there's nothing wrong. This is just the way the process goes. So when management starts to see that you have so many rapid occurrences of this thing, and it justifies the time and energy of your engineers to fix it, once you fix it, it's permanently solved. So I mean, that's just one of many different ways that you can do this. It really comes down to, where is your problems? So like, again, what are you trying to fix? Is it quality? Is it productivity? And we can take it from there.
So Ben, just looking at that question comes to mind. With your experience, how much capacity do folks tend to find when they go down this digital twinning route? Because I feel like we're gonna, if we went this way, we're gonna expose all these areas of waste. And it's like, man, we're out of capacity. We need to move into a new shop. We need more floor space. We need more people. But the truth is, there's probably a lot of waste, and maybe that's not the case.
Yeah, that one's, I can know that one quite easily. The simplest way, when we turn the system on, literally turning it on and giving you just that instant visibility, most manufacturers will see a 5% increase. And there's a couple reasons why. The operators that take 10 extra minutes for lunch, or they hear the bell late and they come in there, I don't want to put the pain on the operators, but accountability increases right out the gate. So your operators, knowing that things are being monitored and recorded, they're just a little bit more diligent about getting back to their station. But more importantly is, when your leads and your supervisors are able to see what's going on, they're faster responding to complications. When you start to utilize the scheduling capability and you're looking into that, and you start moving jobs to prep the operators for the next job, your production gaps drop. 5% is exceptionally easy for manufacturers to get right out the gate. And then usually by like 6 months, once you start to have the ball rolling, 10 to 15% is usually more targetable. That's where I would tend to say that's a safe number. Now, for the customers that want to go even further, the compounding benefits constantly grow. If you really wanted to take quality and you really wanted to focus on that, you can reduce the cost of quality by implementing in sensors that do many of the expensive checks that your operators do. And as you do that, you can reduce your labor even more. So the opportunities to benefit from digitizing continuously grow based on how much energy you put in. And what I usually would recommend to manufacturers is start with the low-hanging fruit. Get that 5%, get the benefits of the system, pay for it, and then take a moment to create a strategy. Where do you want to go from here? But it's already been proven. You and your staff understand that this is a good thing for all of us. Now we want to see if this next thing is worth it. And if you have to spend a little bit more money to buy new sensory devices, the goal is that this product is proven value. So as you buy more and more, you're not taking risks. You're not adding expenses to your organization. You're taking from the profits of all this cost avoidance that you never had to spend, and you're reusing that to invest in yourself. So the benefits will compound.
Hey, Ben,
Based on that,
oh, go ahead, Jake.
I was gonna say, just based on that, what is a typical timeline where if I invest in some digital twinning systems and processes, when can I see my return on that investment?
Now, on that one, it's going to be, I think, fixated to your vendor or whatever solution you put into place. So I can only speak on my experience. So what we have done is we created a 90-day accelerator program. So our goal is to prove value in 90 days. And so we blitz it. Our staff works closely with the staff of the customer. We create a game plan, and we create it to be manageable so it doesn't just consume their resources. It usually will be about 10 to 15 hours invested in total of the champions of the customer. So 90 days, you should be able to see the value to sustain the project. And that would be our goal. Now, that's going to require a genuine attempt on your side. So if you put this technology in place and you don't look at it, it's not going to provide you any value. So it's one of those things that you don't simply put it on and it just runs in the background. It's not a dehumidifier or an air purifier that can do it without even looking. You genuinely have to put some time and energy into it. And then we would coach the customer to do so. But if you don't feel like you have the bandwidth and the resources to be serious, then I would just stall a little bit. But once you're ready to go, I think 1 quarter, the results being realized is something that should be very obtainable. And if you're talking to other vendors and they're proposing 6 months, 12 months at a time, I would question a little bit about what their game plan is, and I'd push them a little bit and ask them why. Why can't we? What we'd like to do is focus very similar on lean manufacturing with projects, one at a time, single piece flow. Focus on productivity, then focus on quality, then focus on training. Find out what you want to go, prioritize that, and then attack them one at a time. But if you try to do a lot of different things all at once, I find that you'll become the jack of all trades, master of none. All of them are going to go slower and they're going to work less.
Hey, Ben, I wanted to go to Parker's question, and that is the report that you shared didn't seem that overly complicated. It seemed rather simple. So are you finding that companies have to hire somebody to manage this process, or is it just the current team can look at the reports and figure it out?
Great question. The current team is usually plenty fine. So we have a lot of reports that are built in, but they're all relatively easy to do. What we would do with the customer is month 1 is all about getting it trained, installed, and running. Month 2 is about teaching your staff how to utilize data. And so what our team will do is they'll look at the production reports ahead of time. They'll cherry pick which reports seem to have the most problems that are viewable. And then we coach them and we'll show them, like, these are the 3 reports we want you to focus on in the next 2 weeks. Look at these, check on these, and let us know if you have any questions. But it's relatively easy to do. There's more advanced reports where you're really doing the statistical analysis of standard deviations of tasks. For those more sophisticated customers, they usually would have manufacturing engineers. Not all customers have those kind of departments available. But again, it goes back to, what are you trying to accomplish? By the time that you're really diving into the advanced statistical modeling, you have clearly proven that this technology is working for you. You have implemented more and more advanced features, and you've probably now hired in an ME department because you're seeing the value. So out the gate, no, you should be able to utilize whatever you have. If you have a good vendor, they're going to be able to tell you honestly, this is what you need to expect. So I mean, if a bad vendor is telling you that you don't need anybody and you do, you're going to fail, and then that relationship's going to end. So a good vendor, I would hope, is going to be honest with you and let you know, like, keep it into bite-sized chunks. You don't want to choke on this project out the gate. So try to keep it simple.
So Ben, you've shared the story in the past of an operation who used the digital twinning and discovered that there was a hiccup in production that could be solved by an additional forklift. I don't know if you can tell us. Sorry, just because it really clarifies to me the value of this digital twinning.
Yeah, that story came up just yesterday. This was an example of getting the cultural acceptance of digitally twinning. So when operators are traditionally afraid of change and there's pushback, especially to data collection, a lot of manufacturers ask me the question of, how do we get past that with our operators? Well, the brutally honest thing is that management needs to provide a value to your operators. So in the story that you brought up is that this customer, they were doing very, very large fabrication. The operators can only pick up one part at a time. Some of the parts, they had required vertical lifts to assist them in that. But no matter what, whenever they finished a work order, it required a forklift or it required a crane to come by to pick up the product to move it to the next location. So when the operators would finish their job, they would sit there twiddling their thumbs, waiting for a forklift or a crane to show up. And the operators for years had complained that that was the bottleneck of the factory, but the management, they didn't believe them. They thought it was going to be, we need more plasmas, we need more CNCs, we need more equipment that provides value. But moving material was not value add to their opinion. And so the operators, they just got tired of asking for more. They figured the squeaky wheel gets replaced. So when we showed up and we were implementing the system, management had the mindset that it was the equipment, which was the most important assets. The operators, they felt like it was the moving materials. So what we did is we created a flag that when the operators were down, they simply toggle that flag and they say that I am waiting for a forklift or a crane. And within 1 month, the senior management were able to realize the value that was lost due to the complaint that these operators had. Everyone was waiting for a crane or a forklift. And this happened on every single job. So if every single asset of yours is shut down for 20% of your day, your production schedule is inaccurate, you're not going to be able to deliver everything on time, you're going to be forced to do overtime, all of that adds up. Within 1 month, the management invested on more forklifts. So the operators, they realized very quickly that, hey, the company is taking data seriously, and they're using the data seriously, and they're investing in change. And as soon as they did that, the operators were excited by this. They started collaborating with the company, and they're like, oh, these are other problems. Let's start adding those in so we can make sure we can record those. And ultimately, it just helps the operators put a dollar value to the things that they already know. And it helps bridge the gap. But if you're not going to look at these reports, and if you're not going to invest in it, then yeah, your operator is going to hate data collection, because it's just another thing that's going to only monitor them, but nobody's investing into the benefit of the operators.
Yeah, from my point of view, Ben, that gives the operators a voice that may not always get heard. And it also allows management to focus on needed change. And you gave examples here of where sometimes an upstream problem can make it look like the problems with a certain machine, but actually the problem is caused ahead of time, or management thinks they have a solution that may not be accurate. So this digital twinning just, I don't know why anybody wouldn't jump right on it. So, man alive, this has been a really good session. I wanted to ask David, Parker, and Jake if they have any other questions before we go.
I don't. Yeah, I think Ben has done a great job. My wheels are turning on how I can apply it to my own business. And I love the focus on the 3 pillars of quality and process flow and equipment downtime. And kind of take that and look at your own business and say, okay, where do we start? Where am I going to have the biggest impact on my return? And the other points that you touched on, just the attainability, right? This is not some transparent touch screen, 3-dimensional CAD model of the shop. I'm kind of picturing that scene in Jurassic Park where they're zooming in on different buildings and the security systems, right? Like this is very attainable to a small business like mine. And when I start to get concerns over cost, you can measure your ROI very quickly. And so anyway, I'm excited to pursue it more, but
yeah,
no, I'm out of questions for Ben for the moment. I will have more for him.
I want to throw to add to the questions. So because whenever we bring in guests and I'm on the questioning side, a common one that I like to ask people too is like, realistically, what should you invest? How much money is this? Is this hundreds of thousands of dollars? And I would tell people that like you're going to want to start small, but you don't want to start too small. Don't just do a single station. Don't do such a small sliver in your facility, because if you're not showing your operators that this is worthy of a genuine test, it's going to be met with a bit more resistance. So we base it off of stations. So we like to see usually 10 cells to 20 cells if it's a bigger plant. And then if it's a smaller plant, just make sure that it's not just one. Make sure that you have a couple of people. And then financially speaking, usually the biggest expense is going to be IT infrastructure. The software and the technology with Scout, you're looking at around $5,000, and that will give you your full evaluation. So that covers the technology, it covers the training and all of that stuff. And by the end of like a 90-day evaluation, you should have everything in position to justify what you want to do. And then the cost usually drops down because we have a little bit of an onboarding stage. But we're not talking about a large amount of money. If you're talking about 10,000 operators and yeah, of course, it's going to seem like a larger money that's associated to this. But the reality is that every single cell that has this type of technology is going to benefit from it. So the return on your investment is going to be proportional to how much you invested in.
No, that's great. Well, Parker, did you have any other questions, or David? Just double checking. We've covered a lot of ground. Oh,
do you mind if I throw just one last thing out there? Ben touched on this a little bit indirectly, but I think something maybe worth mentioning is the benefit that this provides to a company with a workforce that's either already working remote or is starting to shift towards being remote.
That's a fun one. We saw actually an uptick on customers due to the pandemic. And the main reason for that is when you had your production supervisors, you could schedule, you could change the priority of your schedule, you can monitor where your operators are doing. So anybody that's not building the physical product can work from home in a digital twin, even your production supervisors, if need be. I like to have production supervisors a little bit close to the product, but you could definitely move some of those people further away. They don't have to go down to the floor to ask, where is this work order? When is it going to finish? What are you working on next? All of that is digitized. So if you were forced to work under a quarantine environment again, and you had some of your people working from home, having a digital twin gives them the ability to zoom in and understanding what's going on from there. Your engineers that are analyzing your production process, they absolutely are going to have access to far more information remotely than they would on the production floor. There's no longer a need to go down and talk to your operators about how much time does this take? What were you doing during this thing? Because they'll be able to see all that information. So hopefully COVID passes by soon, but in the event we get hit with another wave, if there is a quarantine event that's in the future, digitizing your factory is going to give you that a little bit of an insurance policy to make sure that much of your staff can still be useful.
Now, that was an excellent question. Well, I encourage anybody who has more questions, if this brought up more questions for you, if you can see the value, to get a hold of Ben. I just want to mention that all the people on this call, David and Jake, Ben and Parker, and myself, we're part of a manufacturing community called Camps. Ben and Jake and David have been a great example of manufacturing members who want to make manufacturing better for all of us. So again, we're going to promote this and publish this, but I encourage you to get to know the Camps community, but get to know David, get to know Jake, and get to know Ben. These are just great examples of the type of people you meet at Camps, the Center for Advanced Manufacturing. So thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thanks. Right before we finish off, Ben, would you mind giving everyone your contact info?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, and thank you to everybody for watching and listening. If there's more information you'd like to have, you can email me directly, ben@scout.systems. So our website is simply scout.systems, no .com, none of that. Take a look at what we have. I'm very active on LinkedIn, but my background being a manufacturing engineer, if you have technical questions and if you just basically want to have a virtual coffee and chat more about this, I'm happy to have that discussion. I'm an engineer first, sales rep second. So I really like to understand the problems that you have. Push me technically, push me with your culture, push me with anything like that. But especially, I would like to help the Camps members. So if you're a Camps member watching this and you want to talk, reach out to me. I'm local and I'm willing to do whatever I can to assist.